All right, we are live. I apologize for the delay, a little bit late in this one. Always something, had to reconnect the internet, so now we're good to go. Excited for everyone to join on today. We've got a great show. Taking in some questions, shooting the shit, whatever you guys want to talk about. Bench questions, training questions. Maybe we'll talk a little squat deadlift today, who knows. Football season began. Brady sucks, the Pats are good. Thanks to everyone joining in, taking questions. I got some questions that came in yesterday, some great ones from the Instagram. Sip of coffee to the working man. What's up, Matt? Thanks for joining in, bud. Got some Starbucks today. This is the cream of the crop. What's up, Logan Barbell? How we doing, buddy? Thanks for everyone joining in. Start off with some questions here. Let's get some questions going. We're dropping a code. So again, like always, dropping a code some point during the podcast. That is going to be for 20% off our website till tonight only. Okay, so if you want to get wraps, you want to get a bench program, you want to get some of our elbow sleeves, which are the best, by the way. I always use our elbow sleeves. You get that 20% off code. Good till tonight only. Okay, so stay with us, and I will be dropping that code on the podcast. Thank you for everyone tuning in. Matt says, I asked you about it a few months ago, but I finally got that new red Overkill shirt in. That's awesome, buddy. Let me know how that goes. I've never worked in an Overkill shirt, so I can't really comment on the material or how it operates. I know they're all custom, and with a custom shirt, you really got to be precise with knowing your body as you get into the shirt. So I would recommend weighing yourself each session, just so you get an idea of at what body weight, how's this shirt work, because body weight fluctuations can really make or break your performance in a bench shirt. And when you're playing around with a custom shirt, now you don't have any any stock sizes to go off of. So if I get a stock shirt, all right, I can easily, let me turn this light off here. So if I get a stock shirt, I know how I fit in a 50. I know how I fit in a 52. I know how a 54 is going to work. So I have that to go off of. When you get a custom shirt, and it's custom to you at that point in time where you took your measurements. So it's always good to know, get kind of a familiarity with, how the shirt's going to perform, because your body's going to change. And it's really going to be, your performance relies on you really fitting that shirt well. So that's what I would recommend to you, Matt. Just keep good records of like how much you weigh going into your training session. I would literally just put yourself on a scale before you head to the gym. Let's get into a question that came in the other day on our stories. Remember, on Monday, you can post your questions on our Instagram stories, and I will answer them live today on the podcast. All right, so that's Monday on our IG stories. We go live every Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, on YouTube, on Instagram. Thanks, everyone, for joining in, taking questions on Bench Talk Live. This is a podcast. You can also get this in podcast format. We also have a Thursday episode. Make sure you check out the Thursday episodes, guys. Those are great content, topic-driven podcasts that are going to help you tremendously in your training. So looking forward to putting out another great one for you this Thursday. But this is a podcast as well. Bench Talk. You can get that on Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, iTunes. All right, so let's delve into this question. Do I have experience with wave loading in terms of being a coach and programming for athletes? Is it a viable training option? So everything that I do pretty much in terms of programming is wave loaded in some respect. So that would be over the course of an entire macro cycle, right? Looking at the big picture, say it's like 16 weeks until we're getting ready for the meet. Okay, take a look at that. I'm going to deliver programming in 4-week chunks. Okay, in that 4 weeks, there's wave loading, meaning week one's intensity is not going to be the same as maybe week four. Okay, so the intensity comes up within um, that microcycle of the big training cycle. So yeah, that's pretty much principal wave loading, and I use that pretty much any type of system that we do. If I did some kind of a linear progression, or if it was undulating, if it was a conjugate system, which I'm using with a lot of our athletes now, that's going to have wave loading principles in it. So definitely would recommend doing that. This would be really hard to, if you did 16 weeks of just linear periodization, I mean, you start that far out. I mean, what are you leading up to? If you're waiting to max out at the very end, if you don't have varying intensities in between, I mean, you're so light for a good chunk of that programming. So definitely wave loading is a great way to ramp up intensities and give yourself the recovery, and working that over a larger training cycle, say like 16 weeks or so. Matt says, what got you into equipped lifting? Well, believe it or not, Matt, when I was interning a powerlifting gym, when I first was starting out, didn't know if I wanted to go the powerlifting route. That was what I personally was competing in powerlifting. That's what I was interested in. But I was going to school thinking I was going to be a strength conditioning coach at college. I really didn't know what I was going to do. Private facility, not sure. So I interned and at Gaglione Strength out here in Long Island, and we had a great training crew back then. Some guys that were just really vested in their powerlifting careers and performances, and most of them had these things, bench shirts. I didn't know what the hell that was. This was my first time really encountering this stuff. Because all you really knew at that time getting into it was Raw. I mean, Raw was on the scene. It's predominantly all Raw lifters every meet. So I saw some people working in bench shirts, and it really enticed me. I'm like, wow, you're moving all this other weight, and the technique really interests me. There's a more to it than just moving weight. There's more to it. There's a finesse to it, and I just thought I was interested. And then I got myself a shirt when I was back home going through school, and started training with that in the basement. Didn't really have a ton of guidance on it. Definitely had some screamers towards the face one time or two. Had a shirt blow up on me, but man, I just kind of fell in love with that aspect of it. Raw really doesn't interest me anymore. I mean, it's just so much more involved when you have equipment, because you got to think, in terms of the squat. How am I gonna do my knee wraps at what point? Am I gonna have briefs underneath my suit? How tight do I need to get the straps? I mean, there's so many variables. You have those Inzer Leviathans now. It's got all the strings, so it's like how precise you're going to be each adjustment on the string. Because you don't always want it cranked tight as possible. For an opener, you might need to leave it open a little bit more. All right, so there's so many variables that you have to keep in mind when working in equipment, and I think that's really, really fun and interesting. Cheeky Brit 94. Compound chest exercise like bench or dips hurt my front left delt due to injury. Should I keep lifting but lighter instead? Yeah, so if it's so bench and dips. Dips you can avoid. Bench, if you're a competitive power lifter, you can't really avoid bench for very long. That's what we have to do at the meet. So I would look to go light. That's the one thing you can't really avoid. You can't really avoid comp lifts. You only can for some time, but if you're a competitive powerlifter, you can avoid things like dips, because there's a lot of ways to train triceps, but you can't really avoid not benching at all. So you got to find what variation doesn't bother you. So whether it's doing more slingshot work, doing boards, doing floor press, pin press, whatever the case may be, doing a reverse grip bench press where you have a supinated grip to the bar, whatever you need to do to continue to train the bench press, that's going to be really important. So hopefully you can find a variation that doesn't quite bother your front left delt. I'm actually getting some pain here now too, but I found that I can actually tolerate my equipped lifting, and it doesn't seem to bother me. And my speed work, because the weight's light enough. But other than that, I can't really do heavy raw benching. Haven't been the whole year. That says, and it's more fun if nothing else. Absolutely, quit lifting. Nothing more fun in my opinion. Matt, how would you have a lifter start dropping weight to make a lower weight class, losing 10 pounds or less, for example? So, if you're playing around with just 10 pounds or less, I'd like to see most of that be in the sauna, if possible, because there's two ways you're going to get rid of the water. All right, by your diet, nutrition, and then by just forcing sweat. Okay, and if you force sweat, that's an acute thing. That's a very temporary thing. You know, I'm forcing myself to sweat. All right, I'm going to replenish after. Now, if I have a bigger cut, I've done some 27-pound cuts, and then you can't lose all that in the sauna. You're not sitting there sweating out 27 pounds. Not gonna happen. So that week, then you would have to take away the sodium, take away carbs, manage the water intake, and then if you stay strict with a certain diet, and you're not allowing your body to retain water, you should see about a 2 or so pound drop a day. Um, and then that gonna get you pretty close. I would always be within about 12 pounds of the weight I want to be by the time I hit the sauna. But if you're playing with like 10 pounds or less, I would just go straight sauna, because the more you mess with your nutrition, your ability to retain water, you have to try to replenish that, and it's so much easier to acutely sweat out the water and then replenish it back. You can rehydrate a lot quicker, other than um, trying to mess with your body's retention of that water. All right, so I would always look to do it acutely if you don't have much to lose. If you have a lot to lose, then it's going to be a weak process for you, and it's not fun. But it depends on what your goals are: weight class, records, rankings, invitations, whatever. Gary Sun, can you talk more about bench from the hips leg drive? Should I still drive my toes into the end of my shoes when I bench from hips? Yeah, so what I mean by benching from the hips is I just want someone to be vigilant of the tension they're creating through their hips, and it's really the drive they're getting from their lower body. You should push through. I wouldn't say push through your toes into the front of your shoe. I would look to really have your heels planted as well, have your feet wholly squared onto the floor, and then I would drive through the heels and the front toe. So I would open up. So depending on how you have your stance, it sounds like to me you're doing more of like a leg extension. I would focus on more like if you're squatting, toes out a little bit, right? Drive knees out and then push with heels and toes at the same time. So the whole side of your foot's going into the shoe, and you're pushing away. Like if you had a rug underneath you, you're trying to sweep the rug out from underneath you. And that's how you want to attack your leg drive. And what I mean by bench from the hips is you have to keep those knees forced out, feel those glutes light up, squeeze those glutes, right? And when you bench, make sure that's active and think about the press coming from that lower body, because I'm not saying kick it in at that one point in time, but you want everything moving together, and you don't want to let up on that lower body drive. So that's what I mean by that. So hopefully that makes some sense there, Gary. AI training. My week is incomplete without a sip of coffee for the working man. Sip of coffee to the working man. Got that cream of the crop Starbucks today. What is my thoughts on German volume training for the bench press? Not very familiar with that. Haven't done much with it, so can't really comment. 10 sets of 10 is a lot, so you'd really have to select the right weight. That kind of monitors itself, because with German volume training, 10 by 10, you're not going to be able to use much weight. So that's something where you're going to be automatically put at about 60% or 50%, because you're just not going to be able to handle high intensity with that many reps. But it might be good for just getting some extra volume in. I wouldn't do it as your main work. I think I would like to see a little more intensity, some overload in there once in a while. That's more powerlifting specific. I'd say what you're looking at with German volume training, that's going to be more hypertrophy specific. So you probably see that more bodybuilding circles. If my goal is only hypertrophy and longevity, would it be any good avoiding the last 1/3 on the incline bench, avoiding touching on the chest for longevity of rotator cuffs. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I have our athletes do with the incline. Typically, we're going to attack the incline with a closer grip, and it's going to be Spoto style. So we're going to pretend like there's a two board there, and we're stopping around where that two board is to keep tension on the triceps. At a certain point, all right, you come down and you start stretching out your shoulders, your chest, and a lot of athletes just don't have that tension they can gather in their back. Like they get into a poor position and see the weight dump real quick. You want to try to avoid that for the exact reasons that you mentioned. AI Trace read that some Japanese elite benchers do 20 sets of 10 on nearly a daily basis. How? Well, anyone can do 20 sets of 10. It just has to be light enough weight that you can recover from it. But I find here in the States, we don't push ourselves really to the amount of that the people overseas do in other countries. They, from a very young age, it seems like they are bred to train, and they're training all the time. You know, there's been a thread going on in YouTube about, I was saying you could bench every day if you wanted, and someone's like, if you had a gun to your head and you're like, you have to squat this amount or whatever, you have to bench this amount in a month, or else you die. How often are you going to bench? Are you going to bench once a week? Or are you going to bench every day? If you are looking to make the most gains possible, you're going to bench every day. Is that sustainable? Probably not. You need to be able to recover, but you can always, your body is very adaptable, and a lot of us can benefit from just pushing ourselves a bit more. I always say, if it doesn't feel like you did much when you leave the gym, you have to do more. You really got to be thrashed. You got to be wanting that recovery, or you have to push yourself a little bit more. And if we're real with ourselves, we definitely have more to give. Do you need to do 20 sets of 10? I don't think that at all. I think you can make very good progress in a way that's going to be more conducive to your recovery. How important is gaining weight to gain strength? If you're an intermediate, should I gain weight to bust through a plateau, then diet down? Thanks, coach. How important is gaining weight? I don't think, especially for someone starting out, I don't think you need to worry about weight whatsoever. I mean, you're going to touch a barbell and shit's going to fly up on you. So I wouldn't worry too much about gaining weight. If you're at a plateau and you're at that intermediate, more advanced, you have more training years under your belt, then gaining some weight would be a good way to get things moving again. Because if you gain weight, guarantee your bench is going to go up. I'll tell you that much. Trident Barbell Club. What's up, Rob? How much bench press variation, board, slingshot, varied grips would you use in a 2-day-a-week geared bench press cycle, full power? Would you back it off as you got closer to the meet? Not sure what you mean by the backing it off as you get closer to the meet. You mean in variations? Because I would definitely try to get more specific with what you're doing as you go into the meet. Boards are a great way. I like using boards as a way, if you have an idea of what you want to attempt at the meet, taking these attempts to different boards. Some lifters might want to avoid boards. Like I do have a lifter who's having a hard time putting together the full groove, so he can do great to a 2-board. As soon as that 2-board's taken away, he's having a really hard time all the way down to the chest. So for him, I'd probably peak him different. I wouldn't have him do attempts to boards. For him, we're going to do a lot more just straight weight. All right, so that's that specificity going into the meet that you're talking about. But really, in a geared bench press cycle, you're talking about slingshots, boards, varied grips. I mean, the shirt's going to be in there regularly. I'm going to try to have someone in the shirt as an equipped lifter as often as I can. Slingshot work, not quite as much of. I mostly use that now as more of a deload. Or if you have to get out of the shirt, it's causing you some pain, you need a little deload, we'll jump in like a Titan Ram. I try to stay away from the slingshots. I leave that for the raw lifters. I'd like to see something a little more aggressive for equipped lifters. Boards, it really depends on the person and the aim. Like I just mentioned, if someone needs to practice that groove more, they're going to do more of the full range benching. If they need to develop that lockout power more, we're probably going to use boards because it's not going to allow them to really load into the shirt well. So it's just going to be mostly triceps. Um, and then grips, usually going to train with comp grip. Where we would vary grips would be in like the speed work, cat work, compensatory acceleration training, whatever you want to call it. We'll vary grips and bars and stuff in that. Like I said, I've been really working the conjugate system with a lot of our athletes now, raw and equipped. See what we got. Quick facts. I don't know if you guys are getting me with this every week or something. Benching with the bullies or something. Will benching help with bullies? I get that question every week now. Yeah, absolutely. Being a bigger, stronger individual is going to make you an ass kicker. So you'll kick the bully's ass. Bigger bench. Jason Blaha, beautiful nails. Do you think narrower grip benching is better for sports? Yeah, I think it's a little bit more applicable. You know, if you look at a football player, how if they're shooting off the line or anything, they're not out here. All the power's in here and the lats and the back. So, yeah, I do think closer grip is more conducive towards or more applicable to many sports. Really depends. If there's anything I learned when I was going the strength and conditioning route, is that a lot of sports are very different. A lot of sports are different in that some are probably bench press, some won't bench press or overhead some others. And you really got to analyze the sport at hand and what positions people are getting into. A big deal. Thanks for the tips before. Difficult to keep the head down. Yeah, I'm glad that's coming along then, my friend. Getting the head down, that's going to be important. So glad that you're getting that good to go. Bank Cosma. What do you think about only doing cable pushdowns as tricep focused work? Well, that doesn't sound like much variation unless you're varying your grip and attachments and all that. With triceps, I like to see variation. So we're constantly rotating in and out unique exercises. I think cable pushdowns are one of my favorite things. I'll do straight bar, I'll do reverse grip, I'll do it with a V-bar, I'll do any grips that I can get my hands on that are going to vary things a bit. I'm going to do it overhead like this, I'm going to do it push down like that, so there's a lot of exercise you can create just off of cable, so I think you can make that work for sure. Abiel says that's what John Burroughs said about squatting. His guys squat to single maxes on a daily basis. You hear about the few success stories, but not about the tons that break their bodies doing that. And that's the thing, you're always going to hear about good things. There's social media, really, we're using it to promote good things. You're never going to hear about, so-and-so getting hurt or all the bad things that can happen. I mean, there's definitely a way to make it work. Listen, programming, at the end of the day, again, as a coach, programming is a piece of the puzzle, but it's not nearly all of it. Not nearly all of it. The program is not going to make or break your success going into a meet. I'll tell you that. Sure, you can really screw up a peak and make yourself say you're not recovered going into the meet. Certainly, you can screw that stuff up. There's definitely it's a good chunk of the puzzle, but it's not even close to being the whole thing. Your intensity, your attitude, your recovery, so many other things come into play here that, programming, you can really find success doing a lot of different things, which is awesome. All right, there's not just a one-fit-all way of doing something. And I try to be mindful of that, too, with our athletes. I'm very conscious of always trying to tweak things here and there. I do so on a regular basis. This morning I was at Starbucks doing program modifications. So I do that on a regular basis based on our athletes' performance. So, things are always getting moved around. If I think, hey, this is going to work better, we'll mess with it. Mr. Justus, what are your top tips or cues for lanky and long-limbed bencher? Is there any way to take advantage of long arms in the bench press? Yeah, so I actually did a video, bench press tips for long arm benchers, something like that. If you search big benches, long arms, I'm sure it'll come up. But things I talked about in that particular video, as if Josh Bryant says, all right, long arm benchers, the one thing they do have going for them, longer eccentric loading phase. Okay, so you're gonna able to really take advantage of that stretch reflex, get good pop off the chest. Many of the long arm benchers that I work with and have seen have more trouble at end range than they do off their chest because they just have so much stretch and loading going through their bodies that they're usually getting decent pop. So you can take advantage of that. I'd also recommend a little bit of a wider grip. I talked about that a bit in that video too. Take a little bit wider grip. That's going to help cut down the range of motion a bit. Similar to how I pull sumo on the deadlifts, because conventional is a long ass way down. You know, stand on 2 blocks. You're probably close to my conventional. But I pull sumo because it lets me get closer to a more ideal position that doesn't tear up my back and feel like I'm doing a big ass deficit. So little arms and deadlifts never helps. Never helps. Bank Cosmo, in your opinion, how much time will it take for an average person with average genetics, no coach, and all right training, bench twice a week to reach 300 pounds raw bench as a drug-free lifter? That's a loaded one. I feel winded reading that, my friend. A lot of stuff going on. How much time? Those questions are always tough because it really depends on your determination, your ability to put in the work and recover, and there's so many factors, in how big you are. We're looking at an exact number. So I mean, if you're a 300-pound person, I mean, I hope 300 would come pretty quick, but yeah, that's just a tough one. I can't really give you a timeline on that. I like to say I don't know where you're at right now. It could be 3-5 years, it could be 6 months. So it's a really tough one to answer. Ezzy, a lot of numbers. I'm on a deficit right now and I want to increase my lifts. Would it be better being on a surplus on lifting days and a deficit on non-training days? And if so, should I consume extra calories a day before to fill glycogen? Yeah, I mean, that's the general approach that I'd take. Make sure that you're loading up on the days you're going to train, and then when you're not training, you just don't need as much fuel. So yeah, that's definitely the approach that I would take. So it looks like you got a good handle on that. Thanks for all the fantastic information, Mr. Ben. Thanks, Michael. Sip of coffee to the working man. Got that cream of the crop Starbucks today. What's your take on explosive training for tricep and chest for a bigger bench? If you're mean explosive training, talking speed work, I think it's a valuable thing. With the conjugate system we're running with a lot of our athletes now, speed work's a big part of that. And we're varying grips, we're varying bars, we're doing a lot of variations in terms of chains or bands if it's available. I do think it's valuable to build that acceleration, but also need to make sure that we're getting the hypertrophy working. Okay, we need to get some substantial hypertrophy working, because if that's not there, I think that's going to be more valuable than speed work. I think you need to be looking to add size to your body. If that's not a good part of your program right now, then forget speed work. That would probably be what I put on the back burner. I like the max effort, high intensity stuff. I like hypertrophy work, and then speed work would be last on that list, but then also think that's very important. All 3 things. And the conjugate system touches on all of them same exact time. Due to being a thrower, I never benched. Ken and Moore. Yeah, so a lot of times you won't see benching, especially in the strength conditioning circles. If you were in school at the time, or usually throwers, baseball players, you're not going to see them do much benching. Just because, remember, when you're an athlete too, when an athlete is trying to get stronger and whatnot, right, they are getting stronger not for going into a powerlifting meet. They're trying to be stronger for their sport. So, because I'll take it. Thank you. You can leave it there. Yeah, appreciate it. Have a good one. So an athlete is getting stronger for their sport. All right, a powerlifter is getting strong for their sport as well, but that also includes the bench, squat, and deadlift. So there's no way to really avoid that. when you're a baseball player, you're just doing what you have to do in order to get stronger for baseball. Okay, you're not looking to increase your bench or anything like that. So that's the other thing to keep in mind for a athlete. Just got an Amazon package delivery. That was got the garage door open. Great day out here in New York. Nice, nice cool air. September, so we're starting to cool off a bit. It's a good spot to drop the code, guys. Let's drop the code, all right? 20% off till tonight only, okay? Tonight only, you can receive 20% off with this code, bigbenches.com. If you want wraps, you want sleeves, compression cups, bench programs, you're looking to jump on a new bench program, check it out, guys. The code is Hello Coffee. Sip of coffee to the worker, man. Again, the code is Hello Coffee. I would think I need to spell that out. Hello Coffee. 20% off till tonight only. Is it okay to have a little shoulder extension on the descent of the bench press? Some say it's best to break at the elbows so as to avoid load on the anterior delt. Not exactly sure what you mean by that, Gary. I would never tell someone to break at the elbows unless they're an equipped lifter. At a certain point in that groove, I would tell them to help get that touch. But other than that, I'm usually spending majority of my time trying to get a lifter not to have too much movement at their elbows. And then to have a little bit of a shoulder extension at the descent, well, we're trying to get as much of that shoulder extension as we can. All right, so if you're talking about having a little bit of your shoulder rounded forward, that's going to happen with some long arm benchers, things like that. Right, you're going to get a little bit of that forward shoulder movement. We're trying to avoid it as much as we can, but some long arm benchers, it's easy for me to say tuck back here, short range of motion, but if you have a long ways to go, you're probably going to get a little bit of movement there. Ken Moore, due to throwing, I never benched. Recently started and I'm feeling pain in the chest, tendons, and armpits every time I bench. I have longer arms and tend to take a slightly more narrow grip. Any tips? Touch and go or dead stop for the deadlift? Oh, sorry, that's a different question. I thought we were continuing on. So it sounds like if you haven't benched in a very long time, you have longer arms, you have to be very conscious of building that bottom range up, okay? Because probably a lot of what you did, you're able to be strong towards lockout, so you can handle a good amount of weight. So I would look to clean up mechanics, especially down at chest level, making sure the back is tight, you're in a good position, constant leg drive. Look at the mechanics and technique first, but then I would just build it up really slow. Build it up really slow because if you haven't done any benching before, that the weakest part's going to be right down there at chest level, and we need to take our time, build that up. So hopefully that helps you avoid some future pain there. Adil Iqbal, touch and go or dead stop for the deadlift? Well, you can apply either or. I usually like to see my athletes on our main max effort bench deadlifting day apply a resetting pattern. If they're doing multiple reps, bring the weight back down, reset the whole deal. Now, if it's speed work, it's more of like a touch and go. But we're not bouncing. That's the real critical key. We're not bouncing off the floor, touch and go, strict. Chunga 56. I know this is a bench stream, but I'm struggling to keep the bar over midfoot when squatting. Any tips? So that's a great question, and I welcome any training questions anyone has. So if you got squat and deadlift questions too, we can definitely talk about it. So you're having trouble keeping the bar over midfoot. Now, there are a lot of factors that could go into that. So I'd have to probably see what you're doing in your squat, but it could be that you locked up in the ankles a bit, so maybe working some more ankle dorsiflexion or wearing a heeled shoe for a period of time would help you. We have some athletes who that's their main issue. They're just very locked up in their ankles, so we're working on that. As well as you need to know how to open up at the hips. If that's restricted, you need to work there as well with mobility work. I find more than any other lift, the squat, you need to really warm up and get proper mobility working and be able to just have good movement. If you're restricted, I think the squat is the first thing to really be affected because we're talking about a full depth squat. So however your limb lengths are, you need to get all the way down to a competition depth. Um, not everyone is meant to squat deep based on how their hips structure and all that stuff. So um, there's a lot of factors of why that might be troublesome for you keeping that bar over midfoot. Bar position, you might want to try a high bar versus a low bar, um, but I really have to see the squat. Adil, how important is the seated press for benching? You mean like dumbbell overheads? I think they're good, but it really depends on the person. Raw lifters, we're going to do a little bit more shoulder work than our equipped lifters. I think it's a good variation. I don't think you need to do them seated. I try to stay away from the seated ones. I'd rather see someone do something overhead, standing, barbell, Arnold press, whatever the case may be. I'd rather see standing than seated, but it's great head hypertrophy work. Nothing wrong with it. I think get away with creating a big bench without it. Helps with it. So really, really just depends. I always have a mild pain on my inner elbow for the first rep while benching when I'm about to touch the bar to chest while descending, and this goes away on the consecutive reps. Do I lack mobility? So it has pain on your inner elbow for the first rep when benching. Usually, if that's the case, it's usually you have to create tightness earlier, or load into your back more effectively. So usually anything that's affected with the first rep and the rest end up feeling good, it's usually you have to just get into better position or activation initially, which is hard because after you do a rep, it's like with deadlifting, you know where you want yourself positioned. So you'll have to work on that first rep positioning for that. When you're about to touch the bar to the chest while descending, this goes away on consecutive reps. Oh, so we kind of just talked about that. You probably just have to work on what you're doing with that first rep. Chunga says, I don't think it's ankle mobility because I'm able to hold a third world squat pretty easily. So if it's not ankle mobility, then probably have to look at the hips, play around with the bar positioning. Like I said, could be a lot of factors there. So it'll be tough to analyze exactly what without seeing something. Unfortunately, won't be able to here. But if you want to shoot me a message, you're more than welcome to. Shoot me a DM on Instagram or wherever. We have any questions coming in here? We got the Instagram. Favorite speed wave, 3 weeks, 40 to 50% chains and bands. So we do things in 4-week phases. So it'll be 45. So we're talking bench, 40, 45, 50, back down to 40, aiming to do better in week 1. That's the progression that we use on the speed work in a 5x5. Chains and bands get varied, as does grips and bars, things like that. Whatever our athletes have available to them. We'll take a few more questions here, guys. We got a common one about equipment, bench shirts. For someone new to equipment, would you recommend a multiply or single ply bench shirt? Typically, my answer to this is it really doesn't matter. I think you're gonna make do with whatever you get. They're just, you gotta think of just different classifications. I think the single ply is gonna be easier to manage at first, starting out. So I'd like to see that progression single ply to multi, but at the end of the day, whatever you end up getting, you're gonna learn it. You're gonna learn how to use it. So really either or. Single ply has more of a bite to it. You can maneuver the bar a little bit easier. I guess a little less forgiving groove. I think you got to be a little bit more exact. It's been a while since I've done some single ply benching, but they're different. They're different. So either or really. We had one about tricep work. Do I like bilateral or unilateral tricep work? So the large majority of my training and our athletes is bilateral movements. Some single arm stuff can be in there. I mostly like to see that for if you're trying to bring up a specific weak area. So if you're lagging on one side, it's not a technical or positioning thing. Then sometimes I've had athletes do extra sets on one arm versus the other, and we do some unilateral stuff. Um, so I'd say a lot of it is all bilateral, but unilateral stuff is great to do time to time for variation as well, specifically for the lower body too. I think doing split squats, your lunges, and all of that is really key. Just think about how your body moves. I mean, when we're moving around, we're not always on both legs creating stability. We to be a good functioning human being, um, we're going to want to be able to move that way. Be able to control ourselves through one limb, things like that. We'll get to Logan Barbell. What do you think about speed work with the Elite FTS shoulder savers or foam blocks or boards? Yeah, so you could definitely do a speed cycle with a partial range. We've done that with deadlifts. We're doing some speed deads off blocks right now. But for bench press, it really depends on what you're trying to address. If you typically have a lockout issue, maybe not a bad idea to do some extra speed work with a closer grip or doing it in partial range, something like that. So typically, though, on speed day, I like to see a full range. Mr. Justice, thanks for your answer. Regarding the cues, bend the bar or separate the bar. How you doing? When I use these cues, I just end up bending my wrist. Do you have alternative cues that serve the same purpose? Bend the bar, separate the bar. When I use these cues, I end up bending my wrist. So I first look at why that's happening. Do you mean bending the wrist as in getting bent back? Because then I would look to how you're creating that tension. Make sure it's really tied in with the back. If I had alternative cues for that, you could think about squeezing something off in your armpit, because that's usually going to get you thinking more about your back and your scaps than is your connection to the bar. So I would think about it less at wrist level, think about it more at back level. So if you had a band around your biceps and you were benching, right, keeping that tension out, squeezing something off in your shoulder, in your armpit, try to drag your shoulder blade down to your hip. All that stuff's going to help get your back tight without necessarily thinking about it at like wrist level. Adil Iqbal, what are your hopes and goals, coach? Good question, bud. So obviously with the business, trying to impact more lifters, try to really just leave a positive mark on many lifters' experience, spread powerlifting, good information, kind of be a leading voice in that. And then, I'll just keep doing bench clinics, all that stuff. You know the deal, guys. So definitely that's like at the forefront of my mind right now, even more so than my own personal lifting. But in terms of my own personal lifting, I'd like to make a run towards potentially doing WPO one day. Maybe not within the next year, but the year after that. I really haven't strung together very consistent squat and deadlift training cycles back to back to back. Been a while since I did that, 2016 into 17. Anytime before that period of time, I wasn't messing around as much with bench only. In the past 3 years, I've messed around a lot with bench only, so I haven't had consistent squat and deadlift cycles. So I'm excited to just be training right now with the guys, having a good time, and we'll see where the cards may fall. December's the next full power meet. I think I'm going to be put in a pretty decent category with the Glossbrenner score. If I can get about that 2200, around that 220 weight class, and I'm dropping weight right now. I'm trying to settle out in a new weight class. So, that's ultimately, I would like to have that experience, even if it's just getting there and being able to compete at that level too, because that's the highest right now for equipped lifting since it came back on the scene 2 years ago. So I'd really like to be there doing that. But really coaching right now is really at the forefront. of my mind in developing our athletes and building our team and reaching more lifters. Will deadlifts have carryover to squat? I think squats will have more carryover to your deadlift, but yeah, I mean, being a strong individual, having a strong back, especially think about the deadlift, the position you're in. It's great to build that up, build that back strength. If you're in a squat position and you're a little bit forward, kind of like the good morning, right? You can power back out of it. Have to have a strong back. When position collapses, that's when you want to be strong in shitty positions too. Okay. All right, guys, taking any more questions? We're going to round these off. Sip of coffee for the working man. Got that Starbucks today. We dropped the code about midway through, so if you guys didn't get that 20% off code, again, if you're looking for wrist wraps, bench programs, we have elbow sleeves, the best in the game. I use elbow sleeves all the time. I run a heat limit on my elbow, pop the elbow sleeves on. I would order a size down, probably from what the website tells you. And yeah, I love the sleeves. Love all our products. So definitely grab that code, 20% off till tonight only. And hope you guys pick something up. We got fantastic equipment. Also, VIP membership, if you wanted to learn a little bit more squats, deadlifts, some more bench technique. We put bonus content, additional content through our VIP membership. We do special promos. We do team giveaways and events and things like that. So a lot of good things happen in there. You'll get access to our entire content folder. It's like having access to a whole nother YouTube of content. All the bench programs are free, by the way, for VIP members. So check that out, bigbenches.com. If you haven't looked into it, look into it. All right, it's very cost effective, and you'll be able to run through programs, have my assistance, all that stuff. So hope you guys check that out. I really appreciate everyone who tuned in today. We had a great time here, Bench Talk Live. Again, hey, check out our Thursday episodes. All right, this is a podcast you can listen to iTunes, Spotify when you're driving around, going to work, or whatever. Toss me on, and let's get stronger. All right, guys, talk to you next time.